Hi, in this video I'll be looking at how you can create a slope graph using the Power BI line chart visual. Hi, this is Jason from Effective Dashboards, helping maintenance and reliability professionals get the most out of Power BI. So welcome back to another video. So a slope graph is a really good means of comparing the difference between values over two periods. Okay, so in this example here we've got the difference between March and April of backlog hours, and we can see each one of these lines represents a department. And at the start of the month and at the start of the period and the end of the period. Now the great thing about a slope line is that this line here gives you a visual representation of the change. Okay, so we can see two things. First of all, if the slope is quite high, okay, then we know the change has been large or significant. And if the slope is fairly steady, then we can instantly see that there hasn't been much of a change. Okay, so it's really only useful if you want to compare changes over two periods. Now you can use it for other data other than time series data, but I'm going to use that example here when we go and build this up. Now the other thing it's got is the ability to see if one department overtook another department. Okay, so if it crosses over like it is here, we can instantly see that integrity became lower and maintenance became higher. Okay, so crossovers are basically a change of one's getting higher and one's getting lower, so you can quite easily spot those as well. Okay, so I'm going to take you through this step by step. Now it's not perfect, and there's a few little workarounds that you've got to use, but I can see Power BI improving on this over time because it's beginning to be quite a useful and popular visualization. So I'll talk you through those, and by the time you watch this video, they may have actually even solved it. So let's crack on, and we'll get stuck into creating our slope graph. Okay, so to start with, let's take a look at the data that we're working with. So we've got this data here where we're for each month, or just basically for 2 months, for March and April, we've got each department and we've got the backlog value at the end of that month. Okay, now if we look at the actual relationship here, we've also created a relationship between a date table and the date, which is basically the month, the end of that month and year, essentially. Okay, so that's going to give us the really small and limited data model that we're going to work with. Okay, so I've started by inserting this line chart here, and I've added a title and a subtitle. So work backlog hours, and then changeover period over prior month by department. So let's start adding in some of the fields here and the measures. So the first field we're going to add in is the date. Okay, so we can see here I've got a date table, so it's just a date from the date table, and we've got that relationship that I covered earlier on between the date table and the date that we're going to use in the actual data, which represents the value at the end of the month. Then we're going to add in an x-axis, so that's going to be the measure that we're going to use. Okay, so I've actually got a few measures here that I've created earlier, but I'm going to use this one here, which is called work backlog with no label, and essentially it's because we're going to use dynamic labels to overcome some of the current shortfalls we've got. But I just want to show you me building that up. So we're going to start off with no labels just now. And this is really straightforward. It's just basically a sum of the backlog at the end of the month, which is that figure we're going to use. So let's pull that into here. Okay, so we can see that we've got a line here that's starting to build up. Now the other thing we want to do is put in this legend here, and that is going to be the department. So let's pull that in there. Okay, so we can see we're starting to see this slope graph here, and straight away we can see that there's increases and decreases, which is good. So I'm just going to turn off the tooltips. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to tidy this up a little bit. So we're going to get rid of this legend here. Okay, now I'm going to get rid of this hours here and this date here because it's clear from the description what it is we're looking at, and we're going to put data labels onto these anyway, so we don't need the actual x-axis here. So the y-axis here. And just turn off the title there as well. Okay, now along the bottom here we've got the date, and again we don't actually, I'm going to leave the actual x-axis, but in the x-axis I'm going to turn off the date, the title. Okay, so that's starting to strip down a little bit. Now what you can do, and what I think would be the easiest thing to do, is now just to add in these series labels here. Okay, now that's going to give us the actual description of what each of the lines are. However, the problem we've got at the moment is because we've got the x-axis set up as continuous. Now that's available if you're using a continuous date range, and that's why we've used that date table to give us that continuity of a date range. What it's doing is it's actually filling in the values in between the 1st of March and the 1st of April. Okay, so it's giving us all the values in between, and that isn't what we need. Now the issue with these series labels here is if we change it away from continuous to categorical, these hop over to the side here, and it's really difficult to tie these up to the actual values here. Now again, I think this may change, and may change quite soon. I don't know when it's going to change, because it's just seems like an obvious flaw. However, I'm going to show you how you can, if you want to create one of these, how you can overcome that with using dynamic labels. We'll do that in a second. So I'm going to leave it at categorical, and I'm not going to use the series labels. Okay, I'm going to switch those off. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is start adding on some values here, and we also need some sort of mechanism for adding in the department, so we can directly label each line with the department name. So let's start off by adding some data labels. So I'm just going to switch those on, and we can see that we've got the data labels there. Okay, so 4.1k here, and we've got 5.5k there, and we're going to change this rounding in a second, because that's not going to be necessarily appropriate for the ones at the bottom here. And we're going to also add in some markers here, and I just think it helps to kind of just highlight the start and the end of the line just with a little bit of a dot there. Okay, so the obvious issue here is that we've now used series labeling to basically, because it puts the actual value off to the side, and it's difficult to associate the actual name of the department with the line value there. And we're not going to use a legend, because again, you're going to have to hunt through the different colors and try and associate the color with the actual line there. Now, this is probably the upper end of the number of lines you'd want to see, and these are quite crowded at the bottom here, but that's fine. We'll work with this for the moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this option here where we can actually set the value of the measure up here as being dynamic. Okay. Now you do need to switch this on because it is a preview feature at the moment, and I'll just quickly show you how you do that. You go File, Options and Settings, go to Options, and there's an option here, Dynamic Formatting String for Measures. Okay, so just make sure that's switched on, and that'll enable this functionality. Okay, so once that's done, I'm going to go to this other measure here, which is work backlog hours. Okay, and up here I'm going to switch between measure, and I'm going to look at format here, and then we can see that I've added a load of code in here that's going to actually determine how the label is going to be displayed. So as a default, the label is going to be displayed with a value here, but this new bit of functionality allows you to change how the label is displayed and add additional words or additional formatting around the label, and you can do loads of things, and I'll leave some links below to some videos that I've already created on this subject. So let's look at what I've done here so that we can add in not only the value here, but also a reference to the department name. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is we want to have a different label displayed for the first and for the last date. Okay, so I want the label to be slightly different for this one as it is to this one here, and I'll explain that in a second. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to find the last date here. Okay, now there is only 2 dates, but we're going to find the last date. So we're going to calculate the last non-blank date, and it's going to be across all selected, which is really just for this visual here. It's just going to be these 2 dates here, and it's going to be on the backlog hours. So it's going to find the last date that we've got, which have got a backlog hours associated with them. And that's going to be this, the 1st of 4th, 2023. Then we're going to just create a couple of variables, a few variables here for the selected date. So it's just going to give us whatever date these are. For the selected department, we're going to use selected value again. It's going to be whatever department happens to be in the context. And then we're going to create some formatting for the work backlog, and that's just going to convert it into thousands. Now I don't want this K here, I want it to be a comma separated thousands, which that's going to do there. And then we're going to create another one here, another format here, which is going to be for the difference. Okay, the difference between the current month and the previous month. And it's either going to be, if it's a positive value, we're going to prefix it with a plus. Okay, now if it's a negative value, this is what this 3 values here, separated by the semicolons here, indicate. It's basically saying the first value in this string here is going to be if it's a positive value, the second value is going to be if it's a negative value. Now, a negative value in terms of a difference will already have a negative, so we don't need to put one of those in front of it. And then the third value is going to be if it's 0. Okay, and if it's 0, we just want it to be 0. And then we're going to return a result, which is going to basically look to see if the current date here is the last date displayed, which is going to be this one here. Then we want to display this format here, which I'll show you in a second, which is essentially going to be the number of hours, then a dash, then the department name. Otherwise, we're going to reverse it. Okay, we're going to display the department name, then the number of hours. Okay, and then we're just going to return the result here. This just forces it to be a string. Okay, because this format section here needs to be a string that's returned. Okay, and that just forces it to be a string. So I'm going to go in here. Okay, so I'm going to grab this and I'm just going to replace it here. Right, so we can see a few things have happened here. The first is that now we've now got these labels. Okay, now the positional labels, we're going to sort that in a second. Isn't it perfect by any means, but it's definitely direct labeling. And we've got, for each label, we've got this one here, integrity, and we've got the number of hours. And then at the end here, we've got the number of hours, then integrity. Okay, so I just think it reads a little bit better here. It means that the actual label's always on the outside and the value's always on the inside. And it's a little bit crowded at the bottom here, but that's just because we've got these values here, so there's not too much we can do about that. But the overall concept, I think, is what I'm really wanting you to take away from this video. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is we're going to sort this out so that the values are always above the line. So if I go in here and go to data labels, and then we've got underneath the options, we've got the position, and at the moment it's auto, but I'm going to change it to above. Okay, so slightly better in that it's always above, so we've got a common place to look for the actual values. Again, it's a little bit squashed at the bottom here, but for the ones that are separated, it's fine. Now, this one here isn't so great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a measure that's going to be used to determine the upper limit of the y-axis. So let me talk you through what I've done there. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to calculate the upper level of the y-axis, and that's going to give us a little bit of breathing space. It's at auto just now, which is basically going to try and automatically give you a y-axis that's relevant to the range of values that are displayed in the actual visual. And it works pretty well most of the times. However, it just doesn't seem to give that little bit of extra breathing space at the top to allow this label to sit on top of here. So it's squashed up right next to it and in fact obscures it. So, okay, so the measure's reasonably straightforward. We're using the calculate statement, and that's going to basically allow us to remove the filters or change the filter context. And first of all, we're going to filter on all selected values within this table here. Okay, so everything is selected in here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go and add in this max x. So we're going to find the maximum value for the backlog hours for each of those rows in the table. Okay, now because each of the rows is a department and a date, we're going to find the department and date combination with the highest value that's in this current filter context here. So this is going to change if you start applying filters or whatever. It's only going to be the values that are displayed in the visual, and that's what this all selected does. Now once we've found that maximum value, so whichever department's got the maximum value, which in this example here is going to be the maintenance on the 1st of the 4th 2023, we're then going to add on or multiply that by 1.2. Okay, and then we're going to use that value as the upper range for the y-axis. So let's go in and we'll add that in. So I'm going to go to the y-axis here and we can see the minimum value is fine. We're just going to leave it as it is. But the maximum value here is set to auto, and we've got this little FX button here, which allows us to insert a measure. It's a field value, and then I'm just going to go and find it in here, and here it is here. Y-axis upper limit. Okay, so we can see we've got a little bit extra space here. Maybe we've got actually too much there, so we maybe just want to multiply it by 1.1 or whatever. But now we've got a bit of space here for each one of these to be able to sort of stand out, and we can see them clearly there. Okay, so that in its own is good, and we can see that these ones are increasing, this is increasing, that's decreasing, that's decreasing. So you get a really good sort of understanding, and that's pretty much what the slope graph is all about. However, if you want to add a little bit of extra functionality, what you can do is in some of these examples you'll see, if you do a quick Google for this, is that downward trending, or depending on what you want, what the aspiration is, but in this example here, downward trending is good. So these would be green, and the upward trending ones would be red, for example, just to draw attention to that. Now, unfortunately, if we go to lines and we look at the colors, there is no option here to set these colors using conditional formatting at the moment. Okay, so you can't set those at the moment for the for being red if they're up or green if they're down, if that's what you wanted to do. However, what you can do is a little bit of an additional workaround, or something, just an alternative, is you can actually add conditional formatting to these colors here, to the color that's used for these data labels here. So if I go into data label, go to values, and we can see under here we've got this FX button that means that we can add conditional formatting to the actual data labels, which is great. So next I'm going to talk you through how I create a measure that allocates red if it's increased in between the two periods. Okay, so I've got this conditional formatting marker color. So the first thing we've done is we've got the difference. So this difference measure here, which is going to calculate the difference between the backlog at the start of the period and the backlog at the end of the period. So let's go and look at that one first of all. So we use calculate, and basically what we're going to do is we're going to use this date add to basically traverse across the dates, which there is only two of them, and find the one that was a month ago. So that's going to give us the value of the previous month, and then the difference is going to be the current value minus the previous month's value. So really a pretty straightforward calculation there for the difference between the previous month and the current month. Okay, so we'll go back to the conditional formatting. So we've got that value there. Now we're going to define a color. So that's a color we're going to use, and you can put any color in there you want. This is going to be the color we're going to use to format this label here. And then we're going to calculate the last date. Okay, so we've got to be able to know that we're on the last date, because I only want to conditionally format this label here on the right hand side, okay, for the last date. I don't want to do it for both. You could if you wanted to, but I'm just going to do it for the last date for anything that has increased. So last known blank date. So we're going to calculate the last known blank, and it's going to be for the backlog hours over, again, all selected dates. So it's just going to include these two dates here, and it's going to get the latest one, or the last one, which is going to be this value here. Okay, and then we'll calculate the result. We're just going to use an if statement. So first of all, we're going to check, or the only if statement we're going to use is we're going to wrap it. An and statement is going to be in here. If the difference is greater than 0 and the selected date, so this date here is the last date, is equal to the last date, then we're going to use this color here, this color increase color. Otherwise, we're going to leave it blank, which means we're not going to inject a color code into the data label, in which case it's just going to default to the color that's the default color. Okay, so let's go and we'll stick that in, and we'll see that in action. So we're back here under data labels, and we're going to go to this FX here, and we're going to change it to field value, and here it is here. Okay, so we can see that this one increased and this one increased. Now these ones at the bottom increased, but there's just not enough space to show it. But here we've got these ones here that are highlighted with red, just to further highlight the fact that they've increased. Okay, so finally, an additional bit of information that might be useful is if you can actually somehow get access to the absolute change here. Okay, so we know it increased, and we know it was the biggest increase of all of these because the slope's the highest, and that's maybe enough. That's maybe all you need to know. If you're at a really high level, you just need to be able to look at this and think, okay, maintenance was the highest increase. Engineering looked like it was the biggest decrease because the slope's higher, and that's maybe all you need. But if you did need access to, okay, well, what was that increase? Rather than having to calculate that value, then it might be useful to be able to see the value, okay, or get access to that value. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch on the tooltips. So I'm going to switch these on here, and we can see that the tooltip is displaying each of the values for that current date. Okay, so that's not exactly what we need. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here, and we've got a tooltip option here where we can add additional fields to the tooltips other than the backlog value that we've already got and already displaying there. So I'm going to add in the difference into this tooltip. Okay, now if I hover above this, we can see that now we've got the department, we've got the drilling, and we've got the difference. So we can make it slightly better by just calling this diff. So it's still a little bit busy. You can see each of the different departments and you can see the difference, which might be enough. Or what you can do is you can create a custom tooltip on a different page. So let me just quickly show you how you can do that. Okay, so I've created a new page here and I have gone in to the page information and I've just set the type to be tooltip. And then I've added in a table here, and to the table I've added the department and the difference. Okay, so these are the two, the department column and the difference measure. And I've just did a little bit of format in there. And then I've just changed the size of the actual screen to match the size of the table and make sure that it kind of looks okay. It's a bit compact and looks fine. Okay, so I've set that up, and the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into here, I'm going to right click on here, and I'm going to go to conditional formatting, and I'm going to allocate the font color to the conditional formatting marker color that was set up previously. Okay, so that's going to be there. I'm going to do the same for difference, obviously. So go in and basically set the conditional formatting for the background color, or the font color, sorry, for difference. So once I've got that tooltip and I've set this up with this tooltip type, let's go back to our visual here, and I'm going to go to tooltips, and I'm going to choose report page rather than default, and I'm going to choose the page I've just selected here, which is this one here. Okay, so now when we hover above this, we can see that we've got the actual difference. Okay, so it doesn't seem to, the tooltip doesn't seem to take into account the legend into the filter context. It would have been good if you hovered over this line here and it only showed you the value for integrity, or it only showed you the value for maintenance, but it doesn't seem to work like that for whatever reason. It may be something I'm doing, so if it is, then leave a comment below. But there's a tooltip letting you see what's increased and what's decreased, and we've carried through the conditional formatting onto that table as well. So an example of how you can create a slope graph. It's not perfect, granted. There's still a few issues with it. I think there will be functionality that will be released that's going to make us be able to use the series labels, or certainly something of that nature. Now there also is a custom visual that you can use, but some people don't have access to custom visuals. So there is one for creating a slope graph, but this one here allows you to use the line chart, which is available to everybody, and there won't be any restrictions that might be applied to your organization. So hopefully you found this useful, and if you did, it's always appreciated if you could give it a thumbs up. And if you want to keep up to date with the latest videos, I tend to release one every few weeks, then hit the subscribe button and you'll get a notification whenever I release a new video. Thanks again for watching, and I'll talk to you in the next video.